Hey ghouls and gals, welcome back to my channel. My name is Taylor and today's video is going to be a reading vlog and review of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. So sound off down below if you do this, because I do this all the time and I often get burnt because of it. But 9 times out of 10, if I am really looking forward to something, I just put it off. Books, movies, TV shows, it's all over the place in my life right now. For example, Criminal Minds, one of my favorite shows of all time. I haven't seen the last 2 seasons because I don't want it to end. Haunting of Bly Manor, I wanted to watch it the night it first came out and then I keep putting it off because I know I'm gonna love it so much. I don't want it to end. And that's pretty much the same for a lot of book releases as well. It was the same most notably for Philip Pullman's The Book of Dust trilogy, where I took 2 years to read the first one, and then I read the second one just because I was getting more involved in BookTube and I just didn't want any spoilers. And that's the same thing for this book. I've been looking forward to this book since it was announced. I got it. I was so excited to read it at the beginning of this month, and you'd think that I would just sit down and read it because I'm so excited, but I just didn't, because I like putting things off that I get really excited about. I do this all the time and I don't know what it says about me as a person, but like prior to The Orange Tree, I read pretty much like 3/4 of it and then I put it down for a couple of months because I knew I was going to love it so much and I just didn't want it to end. Especially thinking of TV shows, sometimes I just will put off like the last season or the last couple of seasons not to have it end, which is stupid because you get spoiled for a lot of things, and that's why I'm picking this book up sooner rather than I probably would like, because I keep seeing people talk about this book and I want 0 spoilers. So that is the great thing about having a booktube channel, is that you kind of have to read your anticipated releases right when they come out, otherwise you run the risk of being spoiled. So here we go. I'm going to be reading this beautiful copy of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. I got it from Book of the Month. I love how it is just very shiny foiled writing. I haven't heard a lot of things about it because every time I see it in someone's video I scream and shut it off because I don't want to be spoiled, but here we go. It's time. It's time. I will check back in with you guys. Let's see, it's like 400 pages? 444 pages, looking at the acknowledgements. So I will check in either every 50 pages or every 100 pages, and then at the end of this video I will have a full review. So let's get into it. So I'm done with part 1. Part 1 is 87 pages long and I'm really enjoying it so far. I will be having reactions and updates by the parts. So for part 1, there will only be spoilers in this little segment for part 1, and then moving on to part 2, there will only be spoilers for part 2, and then at the very end of the video I will have a completely comprehensive spoiler-free review. This is definitely going to be a very slower paced, more of a character study sort of book, which I'm really looking forward to. It really starts off right off the bat with Addie waking up and going through her day-to-day life in this cursed mortal life that she leads, and it's very sad. Right off the bat, V.E. Schwab does not really hold back any punches. This is an incredibly sad and solitary life to lead, and I definitely think that even the premise, you don't really grasp the sadness of Addie's reality. For example, like a lot of the promos were a girl and a devil falls in love, stuff like that, or a girl makes a deal with the devil for a mortal life, but no one can remember her. No one can remember her. I feel like that's really downplayed. So right from the get-go, you see Addie has this routine. She lives in New York City in the present day, or 2014, and she has a routine. She has things that she needs to do, but she has nothing of her own because she can't speak her name. She can't tell anyone about her actual life story. She can't even write down anything. I believe it's anything, but at least she can't write down her name or any details about her life, and she can't really own anything either. She has all these people that she recognizes and that she knows a lot about, but they don't know her because essentially everyone else is Groundhog Day'd just because of her. Like, they can meet her, they can have a nice conversation, get to really know each other. She goes out of eyeshot and they just completely forget about her. So like, she's got this guy who sells some secondhand books that she knows, he doesn't know her. She's got these two sisters that sell her pastries every morning, and they're really nice and wonderful, and she loves them so much because she's been going to them for years, but they don't know. So it's like the same conversations, anticipating almost like you are in a time loop because she keeps having the same conversations with these people, and that is incredibly lonely. So you see that, and then you immediately go back in time to 1800s France, where you meet Addie LaRue and the beginnings of her life, and then what leads her to make this bargain with this devil slash entity. It's not the devil. It says in here that it is older than her god and her devil. So it's sort of like an old god's spirits demon sort of thing. It's not the devil, but she makes a deal with this entity because she is an old spinster at the age of, I believe it's 23, and her parents are making her marry this man whose first wife has already died, and he has a bunch of kids and he wants more, and she just wants to live her life. She doesn't want to be a wife. She doesn't want to be married. She just wants to explore the world and enjoy art and just explore and learn and know and just live by herself. And so she really does not want to get married into this arranged marriage, so she runs away. She makes a pact with this devil, and all she wants, all she says that she wants, is to have time to live and explore and see the world, and she does not want to be owned by anyone. She doesn't want to be tied down to anyone, and of course, as is the nature of these bargains with these more sinister creatures, he does grant her a mortal life. So she's got the time to see the world and all that, but she can no longer say her name, so no one can own her. But no one can even own even like the part of her that is like her name. So she can't even say her name to anyone because that would be them like owning a small part of her, which, listen, I totally get. Honestly, if I were in her situation, I probably would have made the same deal. So this devil pretty much takes her soul in exchange for all of this. It's kind of like promised to him. So she has a mortal life, but whenever she's done with it, whenever she's done with this way of living, which is not a great way to live. I'm sure we're gonna get into it, but I can't even imagine how she survived for so long like this. This devil says that once she's done, he will take her soul, and that'll be that. And she obviously doesn't want that. So I'm very interested in seeing where this is gonna go. I'm really invested, and I just love the way this is written. I can't speak to if it's like V.E. Schwab's other works or not, but it's just written in a very literary way, I'd say. It does remind me of literary fiction. I feel smart when I'm reading it. Obviously that's not like what literary fiction is about, but it's not so much purple prose as it is just kind of really going into some existential things. Like every other page, just even when talking about the mundane, that'll get brung up a lot. So yeah, part one, I'm very invested. I really enjoy Addie as a character, and I'm really looking forward to knowing a lot about her. And I'm hoping we get to see, because right now we've only seen in New York in 2014 where she is now, and then in like 1714 France where she started her life. So I'm really hoping that in like part two we might get some more perspectives of Addie in like different eras of time. I think that would be really cool. I've really been seeing this year that I've really enjoyed this kind of plot setup, which is a character makes some sort of Faustian bargain and then has to deal with the consequences of it, where the terms of the agreement are not exactly as they seem and something goes wrong. It's a really good plot device. I like it either way, and I definitely think it can be used for more of a plot-driven book, or in this case a more character-driven book where there's really no mystery, because in one of the very first chapters you do get to see this bargain being made and then immediately the effects of it. It's not a secret where this comes from. So I think definitely that's going to be a very interesting premise in using that and kind of just exploring Addie LaRue's character. But moving into more of the spoiler territory, I think I love vampire fiction, and as someone who does read a lot of fiction about like immortal beings and immortal life and life beyond life, things like that, I really enjoy like those paranormal aspects. And a lot of the things that are being talked about in Addie LaRue are things that have kind of been touched upon in vampire fiction before. So far, this is the most isolating, most like sad depiction of that sort of immortal life bargain that I've read so far, just because it would be so sad. Like vampires, yes, you can't go out during the daytime, but you can make relationships with people, you can talk to people. There's normally a group of them, like a little family pack. Addie has no one. So one of the very first chapters is going through a typical day in her life, and it's just so sad because she has like the same people that she sees every day when she goes through her routine, and she knows them so well, but they don't know her, and it's so sad, and it's gonna be a sad one, so buckle up. I'm really looking forward to reading the rest of this. The only reason that I stopped reading this last night was so I could sit down this morning and film my reaction to part 1. But I'm going into part 2, which I feel like the plot and more of the action of the story is really gonna come into play. So I'm very excited, and I will check back in when I'm done with part 2. So I'm done with part 2. I teared up a little bit, not gonna lie. So yeah, part 2, we're introduced to some more mysteries surrounding a second character named Henry, who I believe is going to be at least a secondary point of view, which is really exciting because he's got some interesting things going on as well. And then you also see more of Addie going through like the first 4 years of her life sentence, I guess, like going through the first 4 years of this new life, and that was really hard to read. I definitely think, I know I like immediately said, oh yeah, I would definitely do the same thing, thinking about it and thinking about all the terrible things that would go into this. I don't know, it'd be a harder deal for me to make, definitely, because especially when she hasn't gotten the habit of stealing. She pretty much has to steal every single food, clothing item, and pretty much place to stay as well, because she can't die of anything. Like, she can't starve to death, she can't die because of the elements, but her body feels like it is. So while she doesn't need food or water or shelter or anything like that to survive, she does, otherwise she's just gonna be in constant misery and torture for eternity. So the first couple of years are definitely terrible. She's really figuring out how to thrive in the world, and obviously when the year is like 1718, like 1718 doesn't even sound like a year. When it's that early in history, it's really hard, as she's learning, for a woman to kind of make it on her own and to be able to even just walk around without being questioned. And it's definitely hard being completely and totally alone. Definitely trigger warnings in here for sexual encounters that are not consensual and sex work. In a moment of sheer desperation, Addie sells herself to get 10 francs, or I believe they're francs, whatever they used during the time, 10 coins essentially, which was very hard to read about because obviously she felt like she was at like her last straw and really needed those coins. So that was rough. It's very short, it's not graphic, but it does depict unwilling sex work and essentially rape. It's essentially rape because while she agrees to it, I don't know, she doesn't want to be there. So trigger warnings for that, and honestly I think definitely that's a highlight of our modern society, is she can be in New York and spend the night at different people's places for the night without them caring. Hookup culture is very beneficial to Addie's lifestyle because while it's not fun for her to wake up in the morning and the person doesn't remember her, that's like more easily explained as that person just had a couple too many drinks and doesn't remember who they brought home, as opposed to in like 1716 or whatever, someone would consider it witchcraft and try and kill her. So that's definitely a benefit. We do see some more of the devil kind of coming back to her on the anniversary of when she made the deal, trying to get her soul back, trying to convince her that this is not worth it and to just give it up. And one of the parts that really just had me just feeling a type of way was he was like, you know, this is, you're lonely and it's not worth it, so just give it up. And Addie responds with, I saw elephants. And he doesn't understand it at first, but she's talking about how she never would have been able to see elephants had she stayed in her town, and just kind of talking about these things like lions and just the city of Paris and things that she'd never been able to see. There are little moments like that sprinkled throughout her existence that really have made life worth living, and a lot of it is like art. So that is really interesting as well. She's kind of discovering throughout her centuries of doing this that there are some loopholes. She can't leave a lasting mark on the world, but she can influence other people in a way where she kind of does. So at the beginning of each section, there's actually like, it looks like you're in a museum and there's a work of art, and it talks about the work of art and the inspiration that the artist had. And you get to see kind of throughout the ages how Addie has actually influenced a lot of people that she's met to make art about her. So really that's a loophole around the like entity's way of saying that no one will ever be able to remember her, because well, no one may be able to remember Addie LaRue and talk to her and remember her being through that way. Her presence, no matter how fleeting, has inspired some art that lives on through those art pieces. So I think that's a really interesting discussion as well. But that's all I really want to touch base on right now, because I am ready for part 3, and that is 300 years and 3 words. So I'm very excited to keep reading on. And you know, since I've already kind of got those waterworks at the ready, I've already felt a couple of very strong emotional reactions to this book. I'm gonna guess that it's just only gonna get more emotional and more impactful from here. So I will check back in with you guys for part 3. So it's the same day and I finished part 3, and this book just continues just to hit you when you're down. I don't know at this point. We are pretty much halfway through. I don't know if we will see Addie like as much in the in-between time as much as we see the beginning of her curse and then the present day timeline in 2014. That's okay. We've gotten a lot more backstory on Henry. I just love them together. So I'm not normally a romance person. That's something that I've also been trying to figure out this year, because I definitely don't like saying that I don't like a genre as a whole, because I don't think that's fair to literature. But I'm not like a big fan of contemporary romance, or where romance is a big part of the plot in a contemporary setting with no magic. For whatever reason, for me to like a romance, it has to be in like a fantasy setting where there are like some big other things, like plot things happening, or it's got to be, if it's a contemporary setting, like some other exploratory things happening with magic, preferably, because there is a romance. And I mean, like I said, I mean, you've been warned a couple of times. Spoilers for part 3 in this little clip, but there is a romance forming. I feel like the romance at this point in time, it's really showing Addie just how much she's lost all these years. Like, it's so incredible that someone has finally remembered her and that she's able to spend like a week with this guy, like on and off, without him forgetting about her. And I think a large part of that is kind of showing through this character, this other character in this relationship, just how much of living that she's missed out on. Because of course, especially, it even mentions like as time has gone on and casual one-night stand kind of relationships, or being able to talk casually to strangers, it's gotten easier with time for her to create small relationships and to interact with people and to not be completely isolated, but her relationship right now is really just showing just how much she's missed being alive. Although I also feel like this is sad in a different way too, but it's incredibly hard because it's not like she recently accepted this pact. Like, she accepted this deal a long time ago. So while she's not the biggest fan of her existence now, and there's obviously a lot of shitty things that come with it, it's not like she would have had a great time in 1800s France just getting married and probably dying at 28 in childbirth or something along those lines. So she even mentions that, like, this has given her the opportunity to see things that she'd never be able to experience. So while she's really enjoying this, it's not like, you get what I'm saying? It's not like she could have had this all along. She never would have been able to have this. So this relationship is so special, not only because he remembers her name, but also because he really sees her as a person, and that is something that she's wanted, is to kind of have someone who sees her as an equal. The historical fiction parts of this book are written so well. There's this one part where she goes to salon or saloon. I can never remember the correct pronunciation, but essentially this meeting of minds, and she gets to like meet people like Voltaire, and I think it's done really well, and I'm really enjoying those aspects. I really am picky about historical fiction, but I really love historical fiction, so I've been really loving those parts as well as the contemporary parts. And this is the biggest spoiler of all, so if you're still watching, like, this is a pretty big spoiler. Addie finally tells Henry her life. She finally is able to not only tell him her name, which is, I loved when she told him her name and was able to. That was just waterworks almost. I still haven't cried. I have gotten very misty at some parts of this, but she tells Henry her whole entire life story, and she's waiting for him to tell her that she's crazy. And then this section leaves off with, he believes her because he made a promise to. And so now in part 4 is The Man Who Stayed Dry in the Rain, which I'm gonna get to. Honestly, if I pushed through, I probably could finish this tonight, which I want to, because this is definitely one of the books that I have enjoyed the most this year so far. So start in section 4, and yeah, I'm like 225 pages through with this, and I'm really excited to see what Henry's bargain is. I have some theories about what it is. I have like a small theory about what it is just based on certain interactions he's had with other people that Addie has noticed, but I want to kind of experience it for myself. I haven't been trying to really guess the ending or guess any plot twists or anything like that, because I've been so invested with the actual storytelling and just the writing and just really uncovering it as I go. So yeah, I'm gonna get started on the next part. This is the shortest of short updates because I am now moving on to part 6. I had no idea this vlog was going to turn from a dedicated book reading vlog to a day-long reading vlog, because honestly I read like the first 2 chapters I think 2 days ago, and then today, this morning, I really started reading this book, and I'm gonna finish it tonight. I feel like I'm at a point where I can't not finish it tonight. I think I have less than 100 pages left. Let me check. So I have a little less than 100 pages left because I'm on page 360 and the acknowledgements end at page 444. So 443. I'm trying to like look at the pages and not have spoilers. 442 pages in this book, and I'm on page 360, so not a lot left. Honestly, when I was looking at it, I thought it would be harder to read just because the font is pretty tiny, but I'm flying through it. I am obsessed with this book. Still no tears, but there have been several moments where I've had to really pause and I feel tears coming and I fight them back because I don't like crying. So I haven't cried yet, but I have a feeling that this is not going to end too happy. I mean, I think it's gonna end like optimistically, maybe, but just so far the tone of this book has been so melancholy. And I will say we've now found out that Henry actually made a deal to the same sort of entity, and his was that he got left by his fiance, who not fiance, he proposed to her, and even though they'd been dating for 2 years, she was like, no, I just don't think you're the person for me. And he has been plagued throughout his life of feeling like he's not enough. He's like the disappointment black sheep of the family. He went into higher education and isn't using it in his current job. And just, he's always had this nagging feeling that no one actually likes him. And just some of that was just so well done. And he has a lot of anxiety about time. And I'm gonna guess it's probably for a little bit different reason than I have anxiety about time. But like, I know a lot of people talk about Sunday scaries as a thing, where you tend to get anxiety Sunday night because it's the beginning of a new week or whatever. When my anxiety disorder is acting up real bad, every single night, like as soon as the sun sets, I'll start getting really bad anxiety. And just the descriptions of that in this book is just, I feel really seen. So both Henry and Addie LaRue are also either bi or pan. It's never like expressly, like neither of them set a title or a label for themselves, but both of them are shown in relationships and in romantic encounters with both men and women. Part 6 is named Do Not Pretend That This Is Love, and the modern day story where Addie meets Henry has been taking place. It started in March and it's moving through the months, and July 29th is when Addie had made this deal with this entity. So not every year, but he'll come and visit her on that day, or the being will come and visit her on that day. And it's not every year, it's not every century, it's not every decade even, but he does visit her on July 29th. A lot. And so I'm very nervous for that encounter because, I mean, I would assume that he's kind of like an omniscient presence. So I don't know if he's just kind of waiting for July 29th to come and to take away Addie's happiness, because it's definitely a loophole in his system that Henry remembers her. So I'm gonna finish this and talk to you guys later. So I finished this last night and I got my reaction to the last couple of pages, and wow. Wow, this is definitely going to be one of my absolute favorite books of this year. This just really hit me in a way that I was not really expecting. So when I'm holding this book up right now, it's still gonna be like the spoilery section of this review, and then when I put it like right here, that'll be my just comprehensive spoiler-free review. So if you've been like a glutton for punishment and just skipping forward instead of looking at like the timestamp that I'll have down below for the spoiler-free review, then just know that. So first of all, the ending of this book, much like the rest of it, honestly, is definitely going to be something you're either gonna love or hate. It's a very ambiguous, kind of open-ended ending, which I personally love. I know not everyone does, because hear me out, I like them because it gives me enough wiggle room to kind of continue on the story in my head and make it end the way that I want, as opposed to a closed ending. If I don't like the ending, that's just kind of it. So maybe that's like the writer in me, but I really don't mind. I know a lot of people call them like weaker endings if they're open-ended. I personally thought that just with this book as a whole, it really fit the vibes of the book. This book has a very sad and mournful and kind of just wishful undertone throughout, and I don't think it could have ended with a fairy tale ending without just feeling off kilter, and I didn't want it to end just explicitly bad either. So I thought that definitely the ending kind of matched the tone of the rest of the book. If you're going into this wanting like a plot that's gonna have twists and turns and keep you guessing, I don't think you're gonna find it here. I thought this was very character driven, and I did guess a lot of the plot twists as they were at the beginning, but I don't think you really need those. I think the things that happen are secondary to like the character development. So just kind of looking at reviews on Goodreads, I've seen a lot of people say this does not read at all like V.E. Schwab's other books, for good or for bad. So keep that in mind when you pick this up. This is my first book by her, so I don't know how true that is, but that's what I've been hearing. So I've also seen a lot of people not really like Henry's point of view, which I understand. I really did. I didn't feel like it dragged just because the discussions and topics that he was dealing with and feeling are things that I've dealt with before and felt before, so it didn't feel like it was dragging on, just because it is so validating to me when I find really good representation and really good descriptions of emotions that I've felt before in my life. But if you haven't, I could understand how that would get slow or repetitive, but I really loved that. Just the descriptions of anxiety and depression and just not feeling like you're good enough or living up to expectations that no one's really placed on you, but that you just feel like are there. I feel like that was written from a very personal place in V.E. Schwab's life, and I just thought it just worked so well. It was so beautifully done. This definitely is prose and not poetry, but there are some segments that do almost feel like poetry, and I thought when done sparingly, those were really good and really helped impact some certain feelings or sentiments that you're supposed to feel. I don't think it's going to be a writing style for everyone, but I absolutely flew through this one. I feel like this is a book that I just absolutely loved from start to finish. I really loved this one, and I honestly think I'm going to try the audiobook when I want to reread this, because I feel like a lot of the passages are going to be done so well in audio form, because a lot of this does feel like you're being told a story. Well, obviously that's what books are, but like I feel like some of these parts are you're sitting down and being told a story over like a campfire or something like that, like kind of like a fairy tale. So I feel like this book would lend itself very well to audiobook format. Now, normally I am going to be very honest, I'm not the biggest fan of towards the end of a book where you find out like the character is writing the book itself. Like, for example, in The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, you realize that it's like in the book where Bilbo Baggins sits down and writes The Hobbit, and The Hobbit is supposed to be him writing it. Same for this. I don't tend to like that trope. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I felt like it was super popular for a while, but I don't normally vibe with that, and that was something in the ending that I just felt like didn't really work for me, just because I don't really like that trope. But the more like I sat down and thought about it, and I took the night to kind of think on it, and this morning as well, it does really work for this book, that structure of Henry sitting down and writing Addie's life story, just because it really fits in with the themes of Addie trying to find a way to still be remembered, even though she's cursed to never be remembered. So I understand why it is done in here. I'd say that was probably my least favorite part about the book, but just because I just don't tend to like that trope. But like I said, because I think it fits really thematically with discussions of art and your legacy and living on and being remembered. I think that works well here. So it didn't ultimately take away a ton of enjoyment from my enjoyment of this book. So I kind of tried to set that up so you can see it, but it's a very dark book, which I wasn't originally like a huge fan of the cover design, but understanding why it's designed that way and it's very symbolic, I get it, and I totally think that initially, while it wasn't to my cup of tea, just in terms of designing, I think it fits with the book really well. I think it's a really strong example of how marketing and how like the book's cover really tells you a lot about the themes of the story. I don't know, that's the best I can do. I was trying to set it up so you could look at the book and know when the spoiler section was over, but can't really see it. It's really blended in with the bookshelf. But so now here is just my ultimate thoughts about Addie LaRue and the spoiler-free version of it, because I have been really delving into spoilers of this one. I absolutely loved this book. It's going to be one of my favorites of the year. However, that being said, I don't think this book is for everyone. It reads a lot differently than anything else V.E. Schwab has ever done, so don't go into it looking for that kind of style. It's very character driven, almost to a fault. The plot in here is very much secondary to the character development. I feel like that would make it very slow reading for a lot of people who don't tend to like character driven books. I've heard especially the first part of this book reads very slow if you're not used to more of like a slower style of book. But I absolutely loved it. As a person who loves character-driven books and atmosphere-driven books, you're going to find both of it in this book. This is very rich with atmosphere. It's clear that V.E. Schwab spent a ton of time researching different time periods in history and really making Addie's experience in each of those time periods very authentic and feeling like you are experiencing those time periods along with Addie. The plot structure itself is a very standard Faustian monkey's paw type of bargain, but I think it's done in such an incredibly innovative and creative way where you don't feel like you've seen this before, even though it is kind of a fairly common plot structure. I think it works really well with the character development of this story. I think there's excellent representation in here for depression, for anxiety, but keep that in mind when you are going into it. I think this could be very triggering if you are in a low point with those. There is also a trigger warning for attempted suicide, and this book just does get very dark, very existential. I can never say that word at times, so just keep that in mind. This definitely isn't an easy breezy light read. It's very morose and it's very speculative and it's very contemplative, and there are just a lot of large, huge picture ideas that get brought up in this book that really make you sit and think. This is a very quotable book. There are a number of quotes in here that will really hit you deep. At least it did for me. There were just a number of quotes where I just read them and I just had to sit and think about it because it was so wonderfully written. I really loved the characters. This is a 400 something page book, but it definitely doesn't feel like that. I mean, I sat down and read it pretty much in one day because I was so invested in the story. So while it does read very poetic and very big picture and rough at times, I think it's definitely one that you'll be able to fly through if you're really enjoying the characters and everything that's going on. I loved the themes in here. We've got some deep things being explored in here about what it means to be a human, what is love, what it means to live truly, because it's a little bit more than just waking up. The discussions of the importance of art, how it relates to the human experience, and how art in itself can be an immortal thing, and legacies of people and how important that is, and how in a way that is immortality is, you know, different authors and art and even just things that we don't perceive as art, but how we're all capable of like the ripple effect and really changing certain aspects, but not in terms of like history, just changing people's lives with how you interact with them. I thought those were brilliantly discussed in here. If you can't tell by now, I'm absolutely in love with this book and I would highly recommend it. I absolutely loved it. So that is going to be it for this reading vlog and review. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment down below, make sure to spoiler tag it if you are leaving spoilers down below just in case. Subscribe for more content from me. Stay safe, stay spooky, and I will catch y'all in my next video. Bye!